Then these cops tell us kids that we had to go upstairs and check everywhere to see if we found anyone. 5 little girls from ages 7 to 11 sent upstairs, scared out of their minds, crying, to look for a mysterious man. Knowing about the roof access, we all cried, not wanting to go, but they said we had to. To this day, I remember how scared I was. I remember looking, but how well do little kids look, right? The cops didn't listen to us. They didn't check the house, inside or out, and then they just left. We were so scared to be left home alone with some guy there. Who knows where he was? We didn't know if he was just laying down on the roof, or jumped down, or somehow got in, and was hiding somewhere inside. My mom finally got home a few hours later, and we told her what happened. And she told us that there was a lock on the roof access, and that no one could get in. But she checked anyways. Then she went to check on the outside. There were clear footprints in the dirt, dug in good from him jumping off the roof, onto the porch, and off into the flower bed. Oh, my mom was so upset when she realized we told the truth, and we were not believed by the police. We went to the police station the next day, and we were all separated and interviewed. We all told the same story. My mom went up one side of the cops and down the other. We never found out who the guy was, or why he was there. Did he know that it was a house with 5 little girls, home alone? During the summer I turned 22, my boyfriend and I moved into our first apartment together. It was a smaller building, about 12 units, and had an eclectic mix of tenants. Everyone was kind and always happy to exchange small talk if we crossed paths in the hallway or the parking lot. My boyfriend, being more social than I, quickly got to know the names and units that belonged to everyone. Being a young man, he was often asked to help move furniture or carry in groceries for some of the older residents. One woman in particular, Lisa, was especially talkative and seemed to find any excuse to have my boyfriend and I come over to help her around the house. Having grandparents of our own, we knew that she most likely wanted company other than her orange cat, so we would always find the time to take out her trash or carry bags of cat litter up the stairs for her. One day in early July, we ran into Lisa while we were coming home from the beach. I was unloading the car, my head in the back seat trying to gather the items that had spilled from the beach bag onto the floor of the car, when I heard Lisa's voice behind me. "Hello, Jess. Hot weather we're having today, isn't it?" I jumped when I heard her. I never understood how this 85-year-old woman could be so silent. "Oh, hi there, Lisa. Yeah, it was a scorcher." I pulled my head out from the car and turned to look at her. Despite the hot weather, Lisa was wearing a pair of jeans, slippers, a turtleneck, and a wool sweater. Oddly enough, she was not sweating. "I hope I'm not bothering you. I saw you and Jim from my window and wanted to invite you both over for dinner tonight. My brother is coming over today, so I'm making something special. Since you two are always so helpful, I wanted to invite you as well." I hesitated to answer. Lisa had never invited us to eat with her before, nor had she ever mentioned a brother. Also, and at the time I thought I was imagining it, something seemed to be off about her. She was several inches shorter than I, and usually looked up at me and made eye contact when she talked. This time, she was standing several feet away and staring at what seemed to me the tail light 2 feet to my side. At the time, I brushed it off as exhaustion from the heat. It was 90 degrees after all, and she did appear to be wearing far too much clothing for the weather. Just as I was about to decline the offer, something in my gut telling me tonight would be a night to stay in, my boyfriend walked outside. "Hi, Lisa, how's your day been?" Jim said in his usual friendly tone. "I hope I'm not bothering you. I saw you and Jim from my window and wanted to invite you both over for dinner tonight. My brother is coming over today, so I'm making something special. Since you two are always so helpful, I wanted to invite you as well," Lisa said, repeating exactly what she had just said to me, never breaking the gaze from the taillight. Of course we will. We would love to meet your brother and try your cooking." Jim, always the social butterfly. It was something I loved about him when we met, but there were times when it could get really on my nerves. "Wonderful," Lisa said. Her face broke out in a smile, but her eyes were still locked in that unnerving stare. "I will see you at 8 o'clock. My brother will be getting in late, so we'll have to have a late dinner." Before we could respond, she did a swift about-face and marched back into the building. My boyfriend and I stared at each other with puzzled looks on our faces. "She seems off. Are you sure we should go? Maybe she needs to rest?" I said, trying my best to find an excuse not to attend. "It's probably just the heat. You know how old people get. She's also probably a bit stressed about her brother visiting. I didn't even know she had one, so it must be a big deal." Jim replied, "We have to go. She's expecting us and we don't want to be rude. We seem to be the only people she talks to in the building." I guess you're right. My stomach was doing a backflip at the thought of sitting through what I expected to be a very awkward evening. I never liked dinner parties anyway, but this one was giving me a weird feeling. We unloaded the car and I brushed my anxiety off, as a bit of heat from mixed with a little too much alcohol while at the beach. Once inside, I jumped into a cold shower to cool off and clean the sand and surf off. Jim and I napped for about an hour, and at 8 o'clock we put our shoes on and headed upstairs to Lisa's apartment. Jim reached up and knocked on the door. That weird feeling that returned, and I found myself holding my breath, hoping that for some reason Lisa and her brother would fail to open that door. The doorknob turned, and Lisa, still dressed in her unseasonably warm clothing. "Come in. My brother just got here. Take a seat in the living room." We shuffled our way into the apartment, and as soon as we were taking off our shoes, a smell hit my nose like none I had ever experienced before. It was a mix of rotten meat and mildew, exasperated by the heat of July. I gagged and shot a look of confusion and concern at my boyfriend. He nodded and whispered into my ear, "It's probably just the cat box and an old trash bag. You know how this building gets in the summer with no AC." "I guess," I mumbled back. Jim always gave people the benefit of the doubt. He really was just too nice, and unassuming sometimes. With a knot forming in my stomach, Jim and I proceeded into the living room, fully expecting to see an unbathed, elderly man sitting on Lisa's couch. I was not prepared for what I saw when we turned the corner. No one was there. The only living thing in that apartment other than Lisa was her large orange cat sitting on the armchair. "Lisa, Jim, this is my brother, Daryl," Lisa said with a gesture towards the cat. I squeezed Jim's hand and tried my best to maintain a smile on my face. Jim looked at me. This time the look of terror and confusion was on his face. I mouthed the word, "stroke," at him, and after a moment he nodded back. With the heat and her age, a stroke was the most likely cause of this confusion. Quickly changing the subject to see how she responded, I asked, "Lisa, how are you feeling? Has the heat wave been hard to deal with?" "Oh, it's been terrible. I always loved summer. but it's been too much to deal with these last few years," Lisa said while standing in the doorway to the kitchen. I couldn't imagine how she was wearing so much clothing. I was beginning to sweat just looking at her. That's when I realized that despite the heat and the lack of central air in our building, not a single fan was blowing or a window open. "Lisa, would you like me to open a window for you? It's really stuffy with all these people in here," Jim asked. "No. The bugs will get out if you open the window," Lisa responded. She had that far-off gaze on her face again. This time she was staring just past Jim, at a wall where her photographs were hanging. Jim and I both wrote off the slip as part of whatever was going on with her. Jim mouthed the word "stroke" at me, and I nodded in agreement again. "Lisa, are you sure you're feeling all right? I think we should call the doctor. I think the heat might be getting to you," I said as gently as possible, not wanting to upset her, potentially making matters worse. "I'm fine, Jess. Daryl asked me the same thing earlier. I must be a little tired from the heat. Isn't that right, Daryl?" As Lisa said this, her gaze remained steady on the wall at the back of the room. She didn't have many lights on, just one lamp in the corner. It was hard to tell, but it looked as though her pupils were so dilated that the blue irises were completely covered by the black of her pupils. There was no response from Daryl, as he wasn't there, just a swish of the tail from her orange cat. "How about some dinner? It's just finished and ready to serve." Lisa turned around and walked into the kitchen. Jim and I were both starting to get really unnerved by the whole situation. We thought it was obvious that she was having a stroke, but other than talking to someone who wasn't there and wearing a sweater in the grueling heat, her motor skills and speech were perfectly normal for a woman in her mid-80s. "Jim, I don't think she's having a stroke. I think something else is going on," I said to my boyfriend as soon as she left. "We'll give it a few more minutes. If she doesn't start acting normal by the end of dinner, we'll call an ambulance," Jim whispered to me as we walked into the kitchen. The smell from when we first entered the apartment was suffocating as I got hotter and more uncomfortable. I was dizzy from breathing shallowly through my mouth, and the back of my neck was covered in sweat. When we walked into the kitchen, the table was set for 4. Not surprising after what just occurred in the living room. Jim and I took our seats at the table. The smell was worse now in the kitchen than it had been before. She must really be behind on that cat box and trash, I thought to myself. The glass at the table was already filled with water. I picked it up to take a sip, but immediately stopped when the cup reached my mouth. The cup was warm from the heat, and a sour vinegar smell filled my mouth as I opened it to take a sip. I quickly set my glass down on the table and kicked Jim's leg under the table and gestured towards the water with a disturbed look on my face. Jim picked up his glass, smelled it, and I thought he was going to vomit right then and there. The look on his face was one of pure disgust. At this point, Lisa had her back to us and was preparing her dishes on the counter. Suddenly, I became very concerned about dinner. If something was wrong with the water, what was the food going to be like? I waited. Jim and I said nothing, just stared at each other across this tiny kitchen table, with looks of anxiety on our faces. Lisa's cat jumped into the chair next to mine and let out a low meow. His tail was flicking. "Here's dinner. I made it especially for you, Daryl. I know it's your favorite." Lisa turned around and was carrying a large roasting pan. She set it down in the center of the table. I reached out to help her to avoid spilling steaming hot food all over the place, but realized that the pan was the same temperature as the room. It wasn't hot at all, even though she had just pulled